Let's talk about World Tour mode. World Tour is Street Fighter VI's premier single-player experience. It was featured heavily during the market and promoted heavily during the game's release. World Tour is a brand new experience that most fighting games don't normally have, also known as an actual game attached to the single-player mode. Some of the regulars to this channel may know that I've talked about single-player modes before in the past and how fighting game single-player modes have been somewhat lacking as of recently, with most of the modern games having just god-awful single-player offerings. So what does World Tour do differently compared to every other fighting game single-player mode? Well, to begin with, World Tour allows you to create your own custom avatar using a similar system to the Monster Hunter character creator. However, in Street Fighter you have even more control over how your character looks, so you can just create the worst looking creature you've ever seen. I made a normal dude because of brand recognition, but I've seen some absolutely disgusting creatures walking around. And Goro Majima. From there, you learn the basics of the game. Luke sees two dudes having fun on the street and decides to assault them in broad daylight in front of a crowd of onlookers, and then we're able to play the game. From here, you can explore Metro City and find the old Street Fighter characters who are all doing their own thing. Chun-Li has started her own kung fu school to teach the people of Metro City how to defend themselves. Honda opened up his own restaurant. Blanca is offering tours of the Brazilian jungle. Ryu is chilling at the temple, and Ken is kinda going through it right now. They keep thinking I'm a crypto bro. Hey, cool, can you teach me how to wake up DP? They say I lost all my apes. I never even owned a zoo. Actually, I'm just gonna go. What the fuck is a Shoryuken coin? Becoming a student to one of the World Warriors allows you to use their normal moves, and they give you one of their special moves. You can mix and match special moves from different characters to make your own unique moveset. Want the normals of Kami while having Manon's command grab? Easy. Want to get drunk and hurl yourself across the screen? Go for it. Want to just play Ken? Well, there is one downside to the system. If moves share a motion input, they're not able to be shared across your character. This is a pretty obvious restriction. If you had two DPs equipped, it wouldn't exactly be easy to choose which DP comes out when you use the move. However, this also applies to moves that have the same motion input, but on a different button. So for example, if you have a Hadouken equipped, you cannot equip Spiral Arrow because they both use a quarter circle forward input. This does somewhat limit the moves that you can equip and leads to some restrictions, which is annoying. However, the system still allows for so much customization, it doesn't end up feeling like a massive restriction. The system isn't just a custom character builder though, it is also a completely functional RPG with stats and levels. Now, this bit is supposedly where the depth of the game comes in, as different gear affect your stats, and when you level up, you gain access to more abilities and skill tree stuff, but we'll get back to it in a bit because I have words about this system. But for now, let's focus on the good stuff. World Tour mode has a lot of really good things going for it in my opinion. But the thing that I like the most is the fact that you get to hang out with the World Warriors. Street Fighter hasn't exactly had the most in-depth characters over the course of its series. In fact, even all the way up to Street Fighter V, most characters were pretty one note. Some of these notes absolutely slapped, like a G sharp or a She flat. This analogy broke apart really quickly. But for fans of these characters, there wasn't a lot to get attached to apart from their gameplay and their visual motifs. Juri is sadistic, Ryu is stoic and serious, Ken is upbeat, Zangief loves his body, Kami only cares about the mission, and Honda is sumo. So you can't really blame me for not caring too much about what's going on with these characters, right? Like, apart from their gameplay choices and visual design, there isn't much to go off of. But now, thanks to the Master System, you can actually get a more in-depth view of the character and what they're all about. The system is technically split into two parts. There's the RPG level part, and there is what I like to call the Persona Social Link part. And they're separate, but both is important. The RPG part is pretty self-explanatory. The more that you use your master's moves and style, the more that you level up their specific style. The more you level up their style, the more you gain access to their special moves, as well as specific missions and scenes with them. You also gain the ability to call them into battle at the cost of some super meter, which is just absolutely great. The social link stuff is where more of the character depth is though. By giving gifts and completing tasks with your master, you'll increase their affection gauge. Every few levels of affection unlocks new conversations with your master that delve into their personal motivations, their backstories, or just the things that they're doing. You also get some really nice artwork to go with these conversations, and some of them are really good. I love this one with Cammy and Capri, not just because I get to see them being close and enjoying things, but because they got fucking Dudders in the background! Dudley Sweet! These conversations do an amazing job of fleshing the characters out and give them another way for fans to see how they act and behave outside of fighting each other. I always thought that Cammy was honestly a bit of a hard ass. She always seemed so serious and strict while fighting in her normals, voice line, and cinematics. I always did kind of like Cammy because, of course I did, but I never really had a reason to like her character. It was always been for her moveset or her general design. So when I went into World Tour mode, the idea that I thought would be funny is to have Cammy's normals, Spiral Arrow, and a command grab like Manon's Judo Throw or even Zangief's SPD. So at some point, I would need to find Cammy. So I found Cammy. I started using her style, and then I had to keep going back because she teaches me more skills and things to use. Before long, we actually exchanged numbers in the game, and it came with this little artwork of her saying that you need to reply instantly or she'd get worried. And I don't know, dude, something about this it's kind of charming. Like, you know when someone's sort of hiding their intentions from you, but they're not really doing a good job of it? You know, so I decided to give her a couple of gifts and hang out, and she was just really nice. Like, I thought she was going to be as stiff as a wooden board, but most of her conversations are pretty sentimental, funny, cute, or a mixture of all three. Dude, her image on her phone is literally a cat with her beret, and it's really charming, and it makes me actually like Cammy's character. And she's not the only one who has conversations like this. Ryu finally gets a smartphone so he can stay in contact with you, and you have to teach him how to use it. Jury tells you to get shot in the street before slowly warming up to you. DJ gets rejected and comes to you for comfort in one of the funniest texts I've ever read. The only sad thing I can say about this is that Ken, my favorite Street Fighter character, doesn't have these text interactions. It's all just the dialogue stuff, which, you know, is fine and makes sense. The man is currently on the run because of things that aren't his fault, but I don't know, it'd be nice to see these small things as well, and it makes his social interactions feel like they're missing something. But again, this is just a personal one. Not everyone is going to want to interact with Ken specifically. Moving away from the characters, I do have to say that Street Fighter has managed to do an amazing thing that I didn't think I would ever see in a fighting game single-player mode outside of the indie space. Capcom managed to find ways to gamify fighting game tutorials. They've done this in two different ways, through minigames and through specific combat encounters. Let's start with the minigames, because they're the most obvious one. Capcom added small side jobs all over Metro City that teach you different things related to Street Fighter. You have a pizza preparation minigame, which teaches you how to do different motion inputs, the bottle cutting minigame, which teaches you how to do perfect booms and charge inputs in general, the ball parrying minigame from First Strike, which teaches you how to normal and perfect parry, and a bunch of other minigames which help you figure out the ropes and even get a bunch of money from doing them. They're a nice little distraction and a really good way to earn money to get more gifts for your favorite person. Stop saying you're gonna throw the fucking wrenches at me! Some of the minigames are definitely better at teaching you things than others. While I really like the pizza minigame, where you have to do some really complex special moves, like they literally get you to do Raging Storm. I cannot express enough how good this minigame is. I will say that things like the basketball parrying and board breaking, while nice references to the old game, aren't exactly the most engaging, and the board breaking especially is just too easy. I don't know, maybe I'm just a pro gamer, but some of these seem to teach you basically nothing, and they're not that fun. But then again, the money, holy shit! The second way the game teaches you is through normal combat. Now, this is done in a very obvious and not very effective way, which we'll get onto in a bit, but it's also done in a very good and pretty subtle way, which we'll talk about now. Now, most fights are just general street brawls with grunts, pacifiers, and if you're based like me, every cop that you see. But there are some specific enemies which have their own unique gimmicks and ways that you need to defeat them. There's the obvious ones like the drones, which require you to be able to deal with different projectiles and anti-air them several times, thus teaching you different ways of getting in on your opponent and how to get them out of the air. Or the knockoff Roombas that can only be hit with moves that connect close to the ground, meaning that you have to hit lows or low-hitting mids. Yes, there is a difference. These enemies, while sometimes really annoying to deal with, are great examples of teaching players through gameplay how to deal with specific strategies that enemies can present. Some of the human characters have this philosophy as well. In one of the first tournament settings that you enter early in the game, one of the characters will literally just spam Tatsu, meaning that you have to know how to block and punish them accordingly. There's several enemies that constantly jump, several that spam projectiles, and some of them even go for command grabs constantly, meaning that you have to learn spacing and allow them to whiff. By having the AI do tactics that newer players always inevitably struggle with, you subconsciously teach them how to deal with these strategies in a safe environment, so when they take those skills online, they can hopefully deal with the situations much easier. Now onto the other system that Capcom implemented to teach players. When an opponent whiffs a move, they get this weird glow around them. This is known as pressure time, and it's a genius system. On paper. The idea of pressure time is that if you attack the opponent during their recovery frames, you get more damage, combo opportunities, and possibly a stunned enemy if you hit them with a special move. It is a really good concept, but I can't say it's particularly well implemented. First off, pressure time only shows up during the overworld battles, not in the face-off fights. This isn't that big of an issue, but the overworld fights act more like beat-em-up style sequences, and the face-off fights are the actual fighting game part of the game. Now, I get why they did this. You can still get stuns and stuff the normal way that you would in an actual match in the face-off fights, but if they were to still keep the white glow and bonus damage, I'm sure it would help a lot of newbies really understand the concept of whiff punishing and punishing in general. Also, these fights are just too easy. Every fight right before the big finale was really easy for me, like trivially easy. You know the superhero guy that you can find on the roof near the start of the game? Yeah, you could just throw loop that guy. In fact, you can throw loop the majority of enemies in the game. Even when the game suddenly takes a massive spike in difficulty, you could just sort of spam healing and defensive items and you'll generally be okay. And with that, I think it's time that we finally get into the not so good. Or as I like to call it, the bad. Now, I should probably start this section out by saying that I do think that World Tour mode overall is pretty good, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have some glaring issues. We've already gone over the problem with punish time and power scaling, so let's go on to the cause of the problem, the RPG mechanics, and how they're not really balanced properly. In fact, the majority of the game is really easy. So the parts of the game that Capcom pushes, like finding new drip, leveling up different masters' styles, and creating your perfect warrior, tend to go a bit obsolete, as most players find a dominant strategy that they'll probably stick to, and then have no reason to go and experiment with new styles or equipment. For a personal example, I stuck with the Blanca costume for the entire game and just made sure to upgrade it whenever I got the chance, which probably was a bad idea, but it worked out for me, so I didn't mind it too much. But when it does suddenly get really hard, you're in a position where you either have to go and grind levels so your HP bar doesn't instantly disappear, or figure out a system that you might have been ignoring up until this point. I still have no idea what good stats on gear looks like, and yeah, it is partly my fault. But in my defense, why did they make the Blanca costume so good? And why did they give it to me so early in the game? The main fighting that you do is also really repetitive and tedious. You're going to be getting yourself into a lot of scraps in the game by enemies that actively attempt to start fighting you, and they always have really low HP values, even in the higher level areas, meaning that fights are generally over pretty quickly without much spectacle. I really wish I could say that every fight taught me something new about the game that I could then apply to an actual match of Street Fighter. I don't know how effective Spiral Arrow into Drive Rush, Ken Medium Punch into Manon Command Grab will really help me in a real match. And while this sequence sounds really good when you hear it for the first time, it does lose its charm pretty quickly. In fact, near the end of the game, I just kept using H Blanca Ball, partly because I constantly forgot I had it equipped, but mostly because the bots had no idea how to deal with it. Face-off fights are fine, but they're just the main fighting. I don't have many problems with face-off fights. In fact, I actually like the fact that you get to fight against the World Warriors with your fucked up moveset. But I do wish I could fight them whenever I wanted. Most of the time, you can only fight your master after you've leveled up their skills. And once you fight them, you gotta keep leveling it if you want to get a shot at a rematch, and it's really annoying. I don't see why you couldn't just fight them whenever you wanted, even if it didn't give you a bond bonus and it just helped you level up. I guess Capcom was scared about players using it to farm XP, but There's already ways to cheese the leveling process, so what's the point? Now, a lot of the other problems I have with the game have to do with the plot and the story. I'll keep major spoilers right till the end and remind you again if you want to skip, if you're still going to watch the start of it. So the plot of Street Fighter 6 World Tour is kind of bad. And by kind of bad, I mean it's basically as bad as every fighting game plot generally is. You start out training with Luke, meet your rival, go get pizza, and your rival pisses off. You then spend the rest of the game going and getting stronger. You enter tournaments, you find new masters, some of which are stuck behind side quests, before eventually you decide that you should try and find Bosch, since he just sort of disappeared. So you now spend your entire time going around and trying to find Bosch, which takes you to 2 different places. The setup is fine, I guess. There's nothing wrong with it. I will say that I don't really have any actual connection with Bosch, though. He's only really around for like 5 minutes before running off. The only reason you really want to find him is to help him because he fucked around with the Mad Gear gang and he's like one of 3 people that you know in the city. But you may have already found a problem with the game. None of the characters in the fighting game part of the game have any real connection with the story. Luke shows up at the start and teaches you how to eat pizza, commits assault in broad daylight, and then pieces out for the rest of the fucking game. Chun-Li goes, "Have you met my daughter?" and then goes back to teaching people kung fu. Ryu meets you in Japan and just fucking stays there. Okay, so without the iconic characters, the new characters, including the one that you make, have to carry the game. The new characters don't carry the game. There's a couple of cool scenes, like a jury kicking the shit out of you and Bosch, and, well, without major spoilers, that's basically all I can say, but I can't find myself caring about the story, if I'm honest. The hook is very weak to me, and most of the stuff that you do in the story has very little overlap with the stuff of the game that I actually like. Hell, you don't even get to meet most of the masters in the main story quest, so what's really the point? And then we have the ending, which... Yeah, okay, this is big spoiler time. I'm going to spoil everything from now on, so skip the timestamp to avoid spoilers. Gonna kinda have to talk about it though. So eventually you find out Bosch was part of a resistance group for the country of Neistal. They're trying to take back that country from notorious evil man Jordan Peterson. Their plan is to sneak into the tournament that JP is hosting and plant a bomb in the belt that he will then present to the winner, killing them both. We find this out like a day before the tournament that we just joined, by the way. There's also this dude running around kicking the shit out of strong fighters on the Neistal Mountains, but we really don't know who it is because he has a box on his head, so... Ooh, mysterious warrior man. Before the tournament, you get a message from Bosch being all sentimental about the one time that you got pizza together. So you find him and, oh, he's the masked warrior. Oh my god. He runs off and you next meet him in the tournament. You beat most of your opponents, and then he says he's too powerful and cannot guarantee your safety. So you should concede the match. You fight him later and, yeah, he is actually ridiculously powerful. Like, insanely powerful. He did most of my HP in one combo and it wasn't even close. After losing to Bosch, JP gives the belt to Bosch's sister, activates the bomb, and Bosch has to sacrifice himself to save all of us. JP comments on how it was stupid, and now we have to fight JP, who we met literally 1 day ago. And the fight is just a normal fight against JP. After the fucking roided up Bosch, we now just have to fight JP in his normal power level, and unlike the Bosch fight, we can't lose this one. And when we win, JP just laughs at us, and the game ends with Luke saying that the journey has no real end. So there's several problems with this, if you ask me. First up, the setup is rushed, to say the least. JP is mentioned a little bit in the story, but you literally only meet him 2 scenes before beating the fuck out of him. And even when you beat him, he just goes, yeah, okay, but what the fuck are you gonna do about it? Like, what? Luke is right, the game has no ending. We just beat the fuck out of the bad guy, and then nothing fucking happened. I want to say it's all a bit anticlimactic, but let's be real, we didn't even build up to one in the first place. Also, fun fact, something extremely similar happened to this like a year before the game took place, only it starred Ken and Luke fighting in the finale, and also had JP investing in a shit ton of cryptocurrency. Would have been nice to actually see that bit happen, you know? I think it would have been good if we had some more involvement with JP and had an actual good confrontation with him that isn't just, our friend died so we changed the stage. Maybe have him directly betray us in some way so we have a vendetta against him. Or better yet, have us work with our master to take him down. Basically, every character in the cast has some reason to want to take down JP. Be it the fact that he's using psycho power and the name Neo Shadowloo is waving about, the fact that he stands against their moral code and needs to be taken down a peg or two, or, you know, fucking revenge. Ken's entire thing in this game is that he's battling with the idea that he needs to kill JP to get revenge for what happened, and he just doesn't do anything. This entire plotline was set up in a prequel comic that came out before the game, and then it was just left as fan service for people to discover later. Have me play through the events of the comic as my character, or better yet, have the final fight with JP be a 2-on-1 with a master of your choosing. You already have the mechanic in the game, why not let the player go absolutely ham on this guy and just beat the shit out of him? Give him a bunch of buffed up numbers, or give his special to special cancelling or something like that. Literally anything would have been better than just a normal fight with JP. The entire mode just ends up having this lackluster feeling to it after a while. It's cool to begin with, hell, it's really cool. But after a certain amount of time, it gets repetitive, and the story isn't engaging or interesting enough to keep players' attention after a while. If you don't have an already established connection with these characters, or you don't want to grind for their alternate skins, then after a few hours, it doesn't feel like there's much reason to keep playing, honestly. And that's a massive shame. Look, I really like World Tour mode, but I would be lying if I said it didn't lose its charm after a while. So, what should we do? Like, this is still better than most fighting game single-player modes, but there's a lot that could be improved. Well, the story needs an overhaul, obviously, so that it can lead into the strengths of the mode rather than whatever the hell it was that we got. The RPG mechanics are good, but the balance of the game needs some readjustment, and the difficulty curve needs to be more linear than what we already have. I can't blame Capcom too much for this one, to be fair, because who else has done an open-world fighting game RPG before? I don't exactly know how getting around the problem of players just sticking with the same moveset and not experimenting could be tackled, though. Maybe have it so that after a while the moves that you aren't using get like a bonus level XP thing. So if you want to level up someone's style fast, you should switch out which of their specials you're using for a bit. I don't know though, that's just a thought. Also, let me refight bosses and fight masters whenever I want. There's a bit of a problem where once you've fought a boss, you don't get to fight them again. And there's a certain boss that I would really like a rematch with that I just can't get. Or maybe you can rematch them and I just haven't found it yet. Either way, have it be like a side thing, or just let me fight my master whenever I want. It's really funny fighting Ryu with my fucked up moveset, and I want to be able to do it whenever I want. Also, have more regular grunt enemies have gimmicks. A lot of the standard fights are where you really try your gimmick knowledge check fights, and they were pretty engaging, so I'd like to see more of actual grunts do this sort of thing to keep me on my toes. But still, the main thing is the story. It's weird to have an RPG with a disinteresting story, but somehow Capcom managed to succeed in that department. Hopefully, they're going to see this as a stepping stone, though. The Street Fighter team has shown that they're willing to learn from their mistakes and make something better in the future time and time again. So, I hope they don't see the extremely low completion rate of World Tour mode as a failure, because World Tour mode is, in my opinion, great. It just doesn't play to the things that make it great. As always, a very special thanks to 64MHz, Almost Nap Time, Ben from Canada, Brudica, Savantas de Leon, Daniel Wiedericht, Dragonprox, Games.png, I Am Naoto, Jackal Reeves, Lady Dantalon, Melodically Me, MP04, Enhoa, Ray W, Super, Falcon, Tom Tanks, Voltaic Charge, and Zandatsu for being Tier 2 patron supporters.